systems. Which is still okay.
Modular folks. Just want to sit in the front row here. Just be on the lectern there. Rob, you just sit there.
Would you like to stay there?
Anyone who's speaking, just sit at the front first.
Evening.
And anyone just do
Andrew.
at the back. Jeff, you can get the front.
Sure.
Yeah. Be naughty. Good. Yeah, thank you. Oh, sit here at the, sit below, you sit here at the doorway.
Still room in the base.
Laugh. If you have a light, there's someone local. So, cheers. Thank you.
Okay, I'd like to welcome everybody to our Planning and Development Committee meeting, Wednesday the 3rd of March. I'd like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land and pay respects to their elders, past, present and emerging. I'd also like to acknowledge all other people who have contributed to the rich diversity of this country. Are there any apologies? Can I have confirmation? I gather everyone's read the minutes of the previous meeting. Councillor First and Councillor Davis. All those in favour? Thank you. Our governance matters. Our meetings are conducted in accordance with the Local Government Act 2020 and Vanilla Rural City Governance Rules 2020. Our meetings are recorded and live streamed, and you can find them on our council webpage with the exception of confidential items on the agenda. Councillors' behaviour should be impeccable, as always, and members of our public must remain quiet during the proceedings unless invited to speak to the committee. Conflicts of interest must be declared at the start of the meeting, stating the item number, whether the item is general or material, and the circumstances of the conflict. The person should then leave the chamber when the item comes up for consideration. Are there any conflicts of interest tonight? Thank you very much. Have we got any, item 1, have we got any public submissions?
No.
Item 2 is a planning application, number PO 130/20, building and works to construct additional capacity for the existing alcohol and drug rehabilitation service, 14 car park spaces, a loading bay and associated internal access 1619 Porphyra Road, Longula. I have 6 people to speak tonight, and the first person would be Dr. Stephen. Brent, if you'd like to come up, please.
Thanks for the opportunity.
Just one moment. Please, Stephanie, the microphones are in the middle of the table, so no, you're right, you can stand at the lectern, but just direct towards it, please. We'll give you three minutes. You'll hear a chime, so if you can't wind up, you'll hear you say it.
Great, thanks for the opportunity to speak. I really just wanted to put a face to our application and to our organisation out of courtesy, and to make 3 points before I throw to Peter to talk to the more technical aspects of the application. The first point I'd like to make is that the use of the site's been well and truly established over 15 years. We've run a well-organised program without any systemic issues or failures at the site. And in that time, we've helped thousands of people across northeast Victoria, many to full recovery, and they're farmers, tradies, nurses, and accountants. And there's not a week that goes by where some member of the public or community doesn't approach one of our staff members in the supermarket or the street and thank them for the impact that they've had on their family member, their daughter, their wife, their husband, and for the work that they've done. So that's well and truly established. The second point I'd like to make is, in that time, we've tried to be good community citizens and neighbours. We've got ourselves organised in painting windows in town here, helping out the equestrian centre, over at the wetlands and community gardens. And by and large, we've tried to be self-contained and minimise the impact on our neighbours. I think we've learned perhaps that they'd like a little bit more engagement from us, and we welcome that, and we certainly will endeavour to address any issues or concerns they have to make sure that we are minimising the impact in the local neighbourhood. And the third point that I'd like to make really is to stress the importance and urgency of this application and why we're asking for an expanded permit, really, and the facilities. At any one time over the last 10 years, we've had 80 to 100 people on our waiting list, and these are people desperate to seek help and treatment, which in any other health system they've been outraged if they had to wait as long for. It weighs heavily on us that these people are, their families are falling apart. Sometimes they're overdosing, and at times they're dying. And it pains us that we haven't been able to offer support and treatment sooner than we're able to now. We're in a position, having spent quite a few years scraping together the funds for this facility, and now in a position to make this application, and thank you for considering it. Thank you.
Thank you, Stephen. Would any councillors like to speak? Have a question? Yes, please.
Look, I just have one. There seems to be some concern in the community that future residents may not be there necessarily voluntarily. Could you speak on that, please?
There's no change to the voluntary status of the residents and the clients that access our services. All of them are there voluntarily and can leave by their own volition. We've always had the case where some have child protection on their back, as in their words. Some may have some legal terms and conditions that are saying that this is part of an order, but there'll be no change whatsoever to the nature of the clients. It always has been and always will be a voluntary program.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Fair.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, thanks for your presentation. As I understand it, this is purely for a building and works permit, so it's got nothing to do with what's going to happen in the future. This is purely for building the actual buildings to do that if you do expand in the future. My question to you is, you've mentioned that you've been a good neighbour throughout the 15 years you've been there. There still seems to be some kind of community pushback from neighbours and locals. It's been suggested to me that a community liaison person or group would be a really beneficial to the ongoing. Would the organisation be open to that kind of thing if that was to come about?
We would welcome anything that improves those relationships. We've had a mechanism for complaints that was only used once, as far as we knew. We have yearly open days where everyone's been invited, and so it was a bit of surprise to hear that there was still a lot of anxiety around and some concerns around the development. If a dedicated person at the site was the go-to person for neighbours, we'd welcome that. At the end of the day, we welcome issues being raised with us and trying to address them as promptly as we can. In terms of the point you made about the permit for the facilities, obviously it's our intention to then apply for the extra numbers to fill that, because the demand is so heavy and the cost of not acting at this point in time is so great.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Davis.
Thank you. Thank you for your presentation. Tonight we're discussing a building, a structure, and you just stated then that the purpose of the structure is to increase the numbers. My question would be to you is why weren't the increased numbers, wouldn't that have been the first point of call? Bearing in mind going back to the original, and I was on council at the original time, that that this facility was, it came on that, and really from day one it was to agree to disagree on the number of people attending. And I would have thought after that original, with the locals of the 20, come to agreement to disagree, to agree on the number of 20, that you probably should have maybe gone down that line first and had a public consultation.
Peter may want to suggest,
Sorry if I...
in addition to that, but we took advice. I mean, there's two things to apply for. We took advice about which one to go through first. We're certainly transparent and open that, you know, we certainly want to upgrade our facilities, we want to expand them, and we want to apply for more residents, and that's hopefully transparent and clear, and that's our current plan.
Thank you.
Thank you. If there's no,
Thank you.
Councillor King.
Madam Chair, thank you for the presentation. I just been looking at the report tonight. It has in here that through the permit you're looking at going from 15 residents to 35 plus staff. So that 35 including staff, or is that 35 plus
35 residents.
35 residents? And do those staff stay overnight with residents?
Typically, we have 2 staff overnight. The current permit allows us up to 5 staff to stay overnight. Typically, we have 2 staff on overnight and 15 current residents, up to 15 residents.
Okay, so if we have 35 at capacity plus staff, that's 37 people overnight. Okay, thank you.
Are there any others?
Through the chair, thank you. Thank you, Stephen, for the presentation. I'm just wondering, are you anticipating that there would be a full number of residents there the whole time, or would there be peaks and troughs?
Yeah, look, most of our funding arrangements have an 80% target for occupancy rates, and that's what we're aiming to do. It's always a balance between trying to support as many people to get in, and then more getting ready in time to actually make it in, and then people leaving. So we expect peaks and troughs.
Yep. And sorry, Chair. One more question. Stefan, so I know that there's also been talk about another facility being built in Wangaratta, and they will have their numbers as well. Do you think there will be, too many facilities? I know what I would say, but I need your answer. Please.
Look, Victoria has had half the number of residential beds across the state as other states and territories bar South Australia for many, many years. We were woefully inadequate, and whilst that's not the only part of the treatment system, it's a really important part, and the state government certainly invested in new facilities, including the Wangaratta one. We have no doubt that the need across the whole Hume region of northeast Victoria is more than enough to fill both those facilities, and we're a partner in that second facility, and we work together to make sure that we're balancing out the clients across those two. We're also hoping to take some families in that facility, so there'll be some points of difference across the two.
Thank you.
If there's no more questions, thanks very much for your presentation. And I'd like to call Peter Jewell to Director. Hello Peter, how are you?
Thank you, councillors. I'm Peter Jewell. I lodged the application. The questions come up, why was there this application just for buildings and works? We had discussions early on with council before we lodged, and that was the route that was decided, just planner to planner. So that's why we went this way. I think councillors can draw some comfort because the recommendation, I believe, is very, very solid with good conditions, but it caps the number of residents at 35. With all the application material, we were fully transparent about how the facility would run. So we didn't just concentrate on what the building's going to look like. We supplied details about the program and how many people were going to be there and how many staff. So all that information was in the public domain all the way through. With the objections we received from local residents, we conscientiously looked at addressing all those issues, like suggestions of floodplain and the septic and the water. So I hope we were really diligent and hopefully it's reflected in the report to you today that we did do this very conscientiously. The idea of a community liaison officer in a more structured way, I think will make a lot of sense, because there's some disquiet amongst some of the local residents. So anything, as you've heard from Stefan, to make things better for everyone is a very positive way forward. But the recommendation before you has a cap on 35 residents. We will lodge a second application, but it'll essentially ask for 35. So everything that I think you need to consider is already before you now. So I would ask them that, that we really would look forward to a decision tonight on it, but we will follow up with the amendment to the county permit. But as I said, the 35 cap is in here, and any other conditions you think would be beneficial, I think would be, welcomed by Odyssey. So I do commend I won't talk about the site or anything like that. You're obviously very well informed by this very good report, which is very solid. So I won't go into all the details, but I'm here to answer any questions. Odyssey do accept all the conditions on the report about the slight road upgrade and all the other things. So we've tried to do this as well as we can and as openly as we can. As I said, all the details about the program, the number of staff are there, but I commend the recommendation to you, councillors.
Thank you, David. Are there any questions? Thanks very much.
Thank you, councillors.
Our next speaker is Jeffrey Hill. Welcome, Jeffrey.
Thank you. Before I start, I would like to indicate that I do actually go for a few more than 3 minutes, but I'm speaking on behalf of the local committee that was set up, so I hope I get some grace in going over the 3 minutes. Just putting that out there to start with. I want to thank you for the opportunity to discuss the Mooloolah community concerns and objections to the planning permit submitted by Odyssey House to construct buildings and works to the existing alcohol and drug rehab site at 1619 Mooloolah Road. For those who don't know me, my name is Jeff Hill, a lifelong resident of Mooloolah. I'm here as chairman of the Rural Mooloolah Matters Committee, a committee elected by the community of Mooloolah to oppose the proposed expansion of the Odyssey House facility. As a community, we still do not agree with the location of the facility, but have reluctantly come to accept it in its present format. The other speakers tonight will put forward facts and arguments against the information contained in the planning permit submitted by Odyssey House. So I want to reiterate that we're not against the work they do, we're not against what they're about. Our only concern is the location of the facility and the impact it has on our community. When looking at the application before us, two things stand out. This is an application for construction of buildings and assorted works only. The existing planning permit issued in January 2003, which is the one the facility must currently operate under, is for the facility to have 15 residents and conduct a drug and alcohol rehabilitation program known as Juniors. Therefore, based on what they can legally do on this site, these new buildings can only be used by the 15 residents under this program. However, based on other material provided in the planning permit application, the use of these buildings is for additional residents and programs. How can this work? Don't we have the cart before the horse here at the moment? My question to you is, how can you pass a planning application for a building project when you do not know what the future use of the building is going to be? Isn't it normal for these to be included and assessed in the same application? What if they submit a future application to use these buildings as a staff retreat, convention centre, programs for non-voluntary residents, i.e. court ordered? We don't know because it hasn't been presented yet. They're giving assurances, but nothing is before us. We do not believe you or we as a community have all the information needed to make an informed decision. We believe that the proposed planning permit detailing use of these facilities needs to be lodged and heard concurrently so that all the facts are on the table and we can express our concerns about the whole process. Unfortunately, this continues the ducks and drakes game that Odyssey House plays with the local Mooloolah community. They do not consult with us, they do not get involved in local activities and community events. If the future planning permit for the use of this facility is knocked back, we do not want too large.
Excuse me, Jim, time. Somebody like to extend that? Councillor Davis and Councillor O'Brien, continue.
If the future planning permit for the use of the facility is knocked back, we do not want two large white elephant buildings sitting there, which would also be far in excess of the facility required to run the existing programs. In respect to some specifics of the planning application, the site is zoned for farming. Pursuant to clause 35.07 of the Vanilla Planning Scheme, farming zone land has a purpose to be used for and identified as to provide use of land for agriculture, to encourage the retention of productive agricultural land, to ensure that non-agriculture areas include dwellings do not adversely affect the use of land for agriculture, to encourage the retention of employment and population to support rural communities, to encourage use and development of land-based or comprehensive and sustainable land management practices. The site of 1619 Kilfera Road is zoned farming. How does the proposed planning permit identify with any of these purposes? The use of the land is not for agricultural purposes, it's for a drug and alcohol rehab business. It is not encouraging the retention of productive land as it is proposing to use productive land to construct these two large accommodation dwellings. It will impact on the farming activities of neighbours while limiting the use of that land for farming purposes. The majority of people at the facility will be itinerant in nature and will not support or increase the population of the Moleula community. No land management plan has been prepared as far as we're aware of. My understanding is that to get a building permit to build a dwelling on rural land less than 100 acres in size, you need to have an associated agricultural use on the land also. By deeming this facility to be agricultural, based on the fact that they operate a small vegetable garden and run some poultry, may have been appropriate for a small operation with existing buildings, but in the proposed expansion and hearsay increase in numbers, this is surely not an agricultural footprint by anybody's definition. The original finding of VCAT cannot be carried over to this application due to significant differences between the applications. We also need to clarify a few matters raised in the council in the report prepared by the Planning Department of Council. The report states, this application is for the building and works to construct additional capacity on site only. Then states further that an application will shortly be lodged to amend the current planning permit to increase capacity and programs at the site. How do we know what this is going to be in the proposed permit? Throughout the report it refers to increased capacity to 35 and new long-term programs being conducted. This report, prepared by the Planning Department, appears to use these points as justification to grant the permit to build the buildings. How can you do this based on an unknown? What if the proposed permit is for 50 or 80 new people? Programs taking court-ordered residents instead of voluntary residents. We do not believe you can use an unknown use of a facility as a justification to build the buildings. Secondly, the report states that paddocks are maintained to a similar level to that of surrounding properties. This statement is just not true and insulting to neighbouring farmers.
Further extension, Councillor King, and seconded Councillor Garrotney.
This statement is just not true and insulting to neighbouring farmers. The paddocks are not grazed, they are not fertilised, and no weed control is in place. In fact, they have been slashed once a year for the last couple of years. We have photos here for you to view if you want to, of the paddocks.
Excuse me, those have to be handed to the CEO, please.
Sorry. An interesting point to note that it's going to be difficult for them to use these paddocks for any animal grazing. They planted trees in front of the cattle yard race, making it impossible for livestock to be unloaded or unloaded from the property. Thirdly, the report states that building will be excluded from road frontage via existing buildings, established vegetation, and the topographic and natural features of the site. If you're standing on the road frontage of Kilfera Road, the land is relatively flat, so where the proposed building site is, there is no topographic or natural features on the site that block the view from the road. Yes, there are a handful of trees on the roadside, but they do not block out a lot of the view onto the site. The report also states a study of noise was performed and an acoustic report indicated that any noise emanating from the air conditioning condensers would be contained on the property. This is not the noise that is concerning locals. It's the human voices that can be quite clearly heard loudly coming up the gully from the neighbouring properties. If you don't believe this, inquire with Councillor Firth, who experienced this on his visit to the site on Monday. These are just a few of the items and concerns that we highlighted from the report prepared by the Planning Department of the Council. Not to mention the fact that the buildings, according to that, are being built 300 metres off the ground. There are various other ones that we are willing to discuss with you personally at a later date if you require. In summary, I just want to ask or request you consider a few points. Do you believe that you have all the necessary information to make an informed decision tonight? Apart from Councillor Firth, have you all been personally to look at the site to appreciate how close it is to the neighbours? Have you spoken personally to the affected neighbours to understand their concerns? Are you prepared to accept a vegetable garden and a few chooks represent a valid agricultural pursuit? Are you going to let a non-agricultural business utilising less than 15 hectares of land impact significantly on legitimate farming businesses? As a responsible authority, have you satisfied yourselves that the additional 14 car spots is adequate for the proposed increase in number of residents, staff and other visitors? If approved and built, if at some stage in the future the facility ceases to operate, which it has done previously due to lack of funding, and they vacate the site, how will the site be reverted to the previous agricultural use? The decommissioning plan for the facility should be requested by the responsible authority, council, to address how the site will be operated, maintained and utilised if the current use ceased. Why can't this facility be built at one of their other facilities or at a new facility in an area that will not impact local farming? If you're unaware of any of these, then I answer I probably cannot, then you probably haven't got the information to make an informed decision.
Thank you very much. Jeff, are there any questions of Jeff? Thank you very much. Our next speaker is Andrew Muller. Andrew.
Yes. Madam Chairman, I'm Andrew Muller, and I want to concentrate on the farming aspects and I'd like to study. We farm to the west side of the existing Odyssey House Drug and Rehabilitation Centre, and we farm continually for over 120 years of the original family farm. Passion for farming has always flowed through our family bones. Drought, fire, flood, even climate change from a farmer, which is pretty unheard of, has not dented this passion, but the biggest issue that farmers and their families face is the compromise of our rural zoning, which is in place to protect the most precious asset a farmer can have, and that's its land and its use of land. I personally feel this pressure of existence as like-minded neighbours work productively and harmoniously. Odyssey House Drug and Rehabilitation Centre has never in the 15 years asked me what effect the operation has had on our farming operations. Sure, we've been asked to come down and see how good they operate, but never asked me as to what effect they've had. To a non-farming person, it might seem business as usual. Livestock still grazing over the hills. We don't run any lambing or calving stock on the adjoining property. These animals need a sense of security and reasonable privacy. Councillor Firth would have been aware of that the other day. This cannot be guaranteed with a transient clientele, and even less so with a major building extension 70 metres from our boundary. The proposed tree screening our boundary is a welcome condition, but will have minimal effect as the aspect of our land elevates continually from the boundary. And how long will it take for the shelter to grow? Odyssey House have had 15 years of occupation and have rejected previous land care offers to fence off boundaries to boxland and native grassland grounds. Also in the original planning permit, a proposed levee bank was to be constructed on the Odyssey House boundary. Would this plantation compromise its location and serviceability? We would like to see a landscape plan submitted, which would provide greater clarity, ensuring that the built form effectively integrates with the site and minimises streetscape impact to the Gilfield Road as well. In the original VCAT hearing, Odyssey House placed tremendous emphasis on all farming activities, employing a full-time farm manager encompassing all aspects of rural living and activities including livestock. No hoofed animals have been on the property for over 7 years, with paddocks left to slash once a year. Their farm bore runs 24/7, overflowing to nowhere. There is no regard for this finite rural resource. And with regards to that, all you can do an easy Google search, satellite search of the property. You're welcome to do it, and you'll see the two tanks behind the buildings in the green wedge that is just ready to go. We have tolerated the original VCAT condition and compromised our farming activities to be considerate neighbours. This threefold expansion on our boundary is a slap in our face. We will be forced to change management activities on the adjoining land. That could include containment, weaning and joining paddocks.
Excuse me, Andrew. Would anyone like to extend that? Councillor Davis, Councillor Gunnar, thank you.
Must be the zone, I didn't even hear it.
I did know.
All legitimate livestock farming, I'll start in. We will be forced to change management activities on the adjoining land, i.e. containment, weaning or joining paddocks. All legitimate livestock farming practices with quite unsavoury consequences, especially for vulnerable people. This council has an important decision to make. Yes, there is a need for drug and alcohol rehabilitation, but don't expand it where legitimate existing activities will compromise its full potential and only create future ongoing issues for this council or future council. Governments have to protect farmers and their livelihood. Many like us have a gut full of being cornered, victimised, and the suicide rates are 50% higher in rural areas. Why? We have worked extremely hard over 5 generations to expand our land to be as productive and as sustainable as possible. Even a layman would see the pride we place in our land and animals. Odyssey House is the complete opposite. Their land is 80% vacant and a problem to maintain, i.e. they slash it, with no regards for its sustainability, i.e. they let the water just overflow. Farmers need land. Odyssey House has proved they don't. I'd like to thank Councillor Firth for coming out on that the other day, getting dust on his shoes, standing on our boundary, taking in the vibe and assessing the proposed new building in relationship to our farming operations. Thank you for listening to our concerns.
Thank you, Andrew. Are there any questions, Councillor O'Brien?
Through the chair, thank you. Thanks very much for your presentation. I'm just wondering, has your farming business been compromised with Odyssey House for the past, they've been there for what, since 2003, so that's over 17 years? It's been compromised for 17 years, or is it just a recent
It's been
compromise?
Since
Continuously for 17 years?
Continuous. So over that period, that adjoining paddock was a very good sheltered lambing or birthing paddock. Well, a great aspect because they had protection all the way around it. Now, I mean, it only takes 2 people or 3 people to be outside continually, and stock, especially sheep, will go over the other side of a hill, leaving their lambs behind. So the mortality rate is usually a lot higher. So I've changed the aspects of farming there, just using it as a dry run, so stock that aren't breeding. I'm taking cattle off the property because of that paddock, because of fear of just being spooked and stampeded. So there's been no cattle on my behalf on that property. So that's the impact. I mean, it is just changing. 80% of my farming is, 90% is probably breeding livestock. I'm not a trader of livestock. I breed. I incubate animals and look after maternally and go all the way through the facets. So I don't want to ramble, but that's the impact.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Are there any other questions? Thanks very much, Andrew.
Okay.
Alan Nolan, would you like to? Welcome.
Hello. So, my name is Alexander Muller, and for over a century, the generations before me have farmed this land under the same principle, and that is sustainability, to meet our current needs while safeguarding the needs of future generations. And as a young, passionate woman looking to be a leader in the future of Australian agriculture, the barriers to entry for farming for my generation have never been greater. And with a proposal like this, it only compromises our future even further. Our property in this land is simply part of who I am. And as a generational farmer, to sell and farm elsewhere is not an option to me. It is not a luxury I have. But as a woman, I have to think of the children and the future generations that I have always dreamed of raising on this very land. And the impact that this decision will have on them, because essentially it changes our way of life. Moving on, I don't believe that the planning direction from Jolingham appropriately recognises the economic importance of farming land as the principal land use in Victoria. The Victorian Farmers Federation are currently pursuing the state on this very issue for clear strategic direction, because most planners, they have little guidance on what creates land use issues for different agricultural production systems. Farmers should have the right to farm, and productive farming land to stay just that. Moving on, as we've been told over and over that I know you are bound by these guidelines. And in these guidelines under the farming zone, it clearly states that non-agricultural uses and dwellings must not adversely affect the use of land for agriculture. So I ask what referrals were sought, because engineers were asked upon and the Environmental Protection Authority. But what professional or specialist consulting was conducted in determining that there is no adverse effect on the land of use for agriculture? So as I conclude, I urge you all to ensure that you have the facts and have done your due diligence. In fact-checking, unfortunately, the lies and deceptions that you have been fed by the organisation that is Odyssey House. I ask you personally to make sure before you cast your vote you are 100% sure of your decision. We would like you to vote no to this application due to the impact on neighbouring farmland, as well as not meeting the requirements on farming zone use. We would stop the expansion on this site and it would remain as it is. End of process. Alternatively, we would like you to vote against the recommendation and propose a new recommendation that a permit for the use of the facility would be heard concurrently with this application, so we can express our community concerns against the whole project, not just part of it, not just from a farming aspect that the building is going to cause. Thank you for listening to our concerns.
Thank you, Ali. And has anyone got any questions? Thanks, Karen. Thank you. Our next speaker is Michelle Ramage. Michelle, here.
Michelle.
All right, and that's the end of our speakers if Michelle's not here. So, item 2, planning application, building and works construct additional capacity for an existing alcohol and drug rehabilitation service, 14 car park space, loading bay and associated internal offices. At 1619 Referrer Road, Mollywood. Molly, that to us?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I present to the Planning and Development Committee a planning application for buildings and works to construct additional capacity for the existing alcohol and drug rehabilitation service at 1619 Clifford Road, Mollywood. The proposal includes the removal of an existing small administrative building to the west side of the driveway, construction of 2 parallel buildings on an east-west access, approximately 30 metres from the existing driveway. 2 new buildings containing 15 twin rooms, 4 single rooms and 2 accessible rooms. New sealed access road and car parking area comprising 14 car spaces and a loading bay. 2 buildings of approximately 9.9 by 77 metres in dimension. And a maximum height of 6 metres, but that varies due to the contours of the site. An additional wastewater area to the west of this building is also proposed. The new buildings are put in place to allow an increase capacity of 35 patrons on the site. The application before council is for buildings and works to construct the building and associated infrastructure to allow this increase. The applicant is aware that there is an existing planning permit with conditions related to the capacity of the use of the site, and that an application will shortly be lodged to make sure that both the buildings and works are consistent with the planning permit that was issued. The proposal has been advertised and 10 objections have been received. The issues raised within the objections are outlined on pages 13 and 14 of the report. The proposal has been referred to all relevant referral authorities who advise of no objection subject to conditions. It is considered that the proposed buildings and works can be accommodated on the land without unreasonable impact on the site and surroundings. Now, condition number 4 of the permit relates to the use of the land. It is recommended that this condition be removed from the permit. And the reason being is that this permit is for buildings and works only, and that the original permit conditions of 15 patrons apply to this site until that permit is amended. It's also recommended that condition number 14 of the recommendation should be amended to read that buildings must be set at least 300 millimetres and not 1,000 metres above the highest ground level elevation under the ground. The recommendation is on pages 20 to 23 of the report for your consideration.
Councillors, do you have any questions? Joel? Councillor.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Joel, it's been mentioned tonight and in the report also around the capacity of use permit. I guess getting our ducks in a line, that permit probably should be first on the agenda for council's consideration. How did it come to be that we're working on this one opposed to the capacity of works permit?
So that's the application that was put forward to us, so we must assess that application for its merits. The good part of this application was that buildings and works application was submitted with all of the relevant information for our use.
Mm-hmm.
So if an amended permit was to come in, let's say in the next couple of weeks, it will come in with relatively the same information.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Third.
Yeah, thanks, Joel. When the application for the use does come, and I know I'm asking a question not in what's not in front of us, but I think we have to start working that as a whole. It says in the report that it's going to go up to 35 at this stage plus staff, but it also proposes to provide accommodation to cater for up to 50 residents. If Odyssey House was to go from 35 people and they get that now, would they then have to go for another permit to go up to 50?
Yes, they'd have to amend their permit.
Okay, thank you.
Are there any other questions? Councillor Claridge.
I'd like to put forward an alternative motion, please, Madam Chair, that the matter be deferred and the applicant be requested to bring both this matter and the change of use request to council concurrently.
Councillor Davis, seconded. Would you like to talk on that?
Yes, I would. Look, there's too much that we don't really understand. I don't think everyone's been given the opportunity to speak, and it's really wrong to be trying to look at it as a building permit without listening to everything else. So I think the only fair way for both sides is to try and bring them both together so we can ask the questions that are required. At the moment, we can only ask questions concerning the building, and I know everyone else is concerned about the use rather than the building. So I think that it would be much better if the applicant were to bring them both concurrently.
Is there anyone against this Right, councillor Davis, would you like to speak on that?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Look, I listened to it tonight and I believe it's a bit like the horse and the cart. Unfortunately, we've got the cart coming first and the horse is going to bolt later with the numbers. The cart being the building and the horse being the numbers. I think one of the speakers spoke about that earlier. And when I spoke earlier to one of the speakers, it started off as a contentious issue many years ago, Madam Chair, and I would have thought that if you want to extend something in the community there, then a lot more homework would have been done, and the issue of the numbers would have been the first thing that would have been put on the table, rather than the building. So I fully commend Councillor Claridge's motion. Thank you. Or recommendation at this stage.
Would anyone else like to speak on that, councillor Clerk?
Yeah, as it was pointed out, I have visited an invitation to have a look at the situation. There really are. There's quite a few questions still to be answered. We can only take into account the actual application in front of us, which is a building. There's obviously a lot more to do with that. I totally agree with the recommendation the Mayor's put forward because there are quite a few. One of the outstanding ones to me is traffic control. That would go to my next question to Joel, which even with the building permit, surely we need to have, if we're going to have a lot more traffic movements there, it's a very dangerous intersection. It really is. It's a country road, 100 kilometres an hour, and there's an intersection of Tadong Road coming into it, right at the apex, and the driveway for that for Odyssey House there. And I'm certainly not suggesting one way or the other, but there is no doubt in my mind that that is a safety concern that we really do have to take into account for the future. So, I think Madam Chair is all in favour of the recommendation.
Anyone else like to speak? Councillor King?
Thank you, Madam Chair. No, fully supporting of the Mayor's alternative recommendation, and as Councillor Firth touched on, there's a fair bit of work that needs to be done in considering things of this nature around the permit itself and the structure of the site, but also to look at, obviously with the additional permit that needs to be progressed and putting all that together and having a better look at it that way. There's a lot of community involvement in this, and we want to make sure we get it right. And to do that, we need to have our information in front of us. Thank you.
Anyone else? Councillor Claridge, would you like to speak again?
No, thank you, Madam Chair.
I'll put that to the vote. All in favour? It's passed. Thank you very much. Thank you very much for your time, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Right, moving along. Item 3, building and planning approvals for January 2004.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Through you, Madam Chair, present to the Planning and Development Committee the monthly planning and building and planning activity report for January 2021. There were 23 planning permits issued under delegation, 2 amendments to existing planning permits, and 2 permits issued under VicSmart. There were 2 notice of decisions issued which had objections to them, and there are 2 matters still before the Victorian Civil and Administrative Tribunal. There were a total of 22 building permits issued within the municipality, totaling approximately $1.46 million, with Council's building unit issuing 15 building permits. The recommendation is on page 32 for the committee's consideration.
Are there any questions of Neil? If there's no, oh, are you moving that?
I was going to move that.
Moving councillor Davis and seconding councillor Claridge. All those in favour?
Do I get to speak?
Oh, sorry, I was.
There was pages 28, 29 and 31. Is that correct? Those figures look extremely high to me. Are they fact that all this work's been done?
Yes,
It's amazing. It's amazing. I can't believe it.
Thank you,
I'm
councillor.
not being smart. I'm just saying that there's a lot of work involved in what's happening at the moment.
Thank you, councillor Davis. Did you have another question?
No,
Okay. Would somebody like to move that?
I have moved it.
Oh,
And I spoke at the same time. I haven't got a second that.
second is councillor Clary. Would you like to speak on?
Yes, I would. I do believe the figures, so thank you very much, and I think they are fantastic.
Anyone else like to speak?
Next one.
Okay, all those in favour? That's passed. We'll move on to item 4. Development Department Activity Report for the quarter ending 31st of December 2020. Neil again.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Through you, Madam Chair, present to the Planning and Development Committee the Development Department Activity Report for the quarter ending December 2020. As mentioned in the previous report, the Planning Department, Planning Unit received 80 applications for the 3 months. We receive about 160 to 170 per annum. So this is within 3 months. So seriously, things are happening, which is positive, which is great for Penella. 89% of these applications were processed within 60 days, which is another good news because we among one of the highest in the state for processing planning permits. The building department carried out 232 inspections, which is a lot with a staff member that is there 3 days a week. So with the building inspections, that's quite a high number, and processed 119 building applications. So that's what Council's building unit did in 3 months. The compliance department responded to 151 calls regarding domestic animals. And there were 11 fee dispensations provided, totaling $5,143. The recommendation is on page 37.
Any questions, councillor Third?
I was going to move the motion.
Okay, councillor Clary in the second. Would you like to speak, councillor Third?
I'd love to, Madam Chair.
Surprise.
I believe everything that's going to be in the report. The main reason I want to move it was because I've probably done this a few times, but the extraordinary work by our planners, which is mate Jim Nillish and Joel, that continues to do it. They continue to, we've been trying to get Penella up and running despite what some people in the media think. The fact that we continue to come up and put these figures every month is just extraordinary, and I'd like to thank them on behalf of myself, actually, and the council. Thank you.
And councillor Clary.
Yes, I concur with what Councillor Firth has said, and I also draw your attention to the fact that there were 1,119 phone calls received, which is amazing. And I hope you did answer that call. Anyway, that's very, very good.
Would anyone else like to speak? Councillor
Yes, through the Chairman, Madam Chair. With all this good information in this report, I'm just wondering if it can somehow get out to the media, so the media can actually put this good news story out to Penella, what's going on.
You're looking at the wrong direction.
You're not allowed to look at the people when you're talking to them. I think we need to really promote this, Madam Chair.
Thank you, councillor Davis. We'll take that on notice. All those in favour? Thank you. That's passed. Item 5, environmental. No, you're fine. I'll give you all that. Item 5, Environment and Sustainability Activity Report for the quarter ending the 31st of December 2020. Professor Whitcomb.
Thank you, Madam Chair. This report presents the environment and sustainability activity for the quarter ending 31st of December 2020. As you can see in the table there, done quite a few environmental assessments. The main ones works on road reserve planning, and the majority of those are for fence line clearing works around the roadside. We're well underway with our annual roadside weed control program. Really done a lot of work on chilling the grass and support so far. As you can see, the lake is currently drawn down, so we've been working closely with the Golden Broken Catchment Management Authority, Golden Murray Water, and the Australian Platypus Conservancy to plan for that drawdown. So hopefully it will be down for 6 to 8 weeks. So far it's going well. The Golden Broken Greenhouse Alliance is going through a change of auspice at the end of this financial year, so there's been a lot of planning happening behind the scenes there, and Murray Beauty will be taking over from Shepparton in that auspice arrangement. And the recommendation for consideration is on page 41.
Thanks, Larissa. Are there any questions of Larissa? Yes, Councillor.
Larissa, thanks. The report with regards to the drawdown, who ultimately makes the decision when to start refilling?
So we've got, through you, Madam Chair, we've got a group with representatives from all of the agencies. Yes, we just monitor how it's proceeding and make a decision jointly. And then to close the gate and do it. Depends a lot on the weather. I guess if we get a lot of rainfall, then it's probably no point keeping late.
But it's a group. We do have some input into that.
Yes.
Thank you. And a follow-up.
Yes.
Where do the platypus go?
Okay. So the timing, through you, Madam Chair, the timing of the drawdown is very much around the platypus breeding season, and it's to ensure all of the young have emerged from their burrows, so they're active and mobile within the main water body, and hopefully they move upstream into the broken river there.
Thank you. I think it's a good question.
Councillor Gunner.
Thank you, Chair. I'm interested in the table in page 40 and the item 3 initiative is establish a greenhouse gas emission reduction target for council facilities and operations. And you say you attended the Bourbon Broken Greenhouse Alliance Committee, and there are some actions about EV charging and all that. Are there any follow-up actions so far, and will there be any follow-up actions from that?
Through you, Madam Chair, in regards to the greenhouse gas emission reduction target,
Yes.
there's no direct actions from, obviously, from attending the Golden Broken Greenhouse Alliance and those projects, but they would all contribute to a reduction in greenhouse gas emissions and potential. Potentially we do need to set a reduction target.
Follow-up question. So, do you have any suggestions, or are we heading anywhere with our council plan, since we're in the planning stage at the moment?
Through you, Madam Chair, I would suggest we consider that it is included. We have done some work on establishing our baseline emissions and the way for monitoring and reporting on our emissions, so there probably wasn't any point in setting a target until we had the ability to do that. So that's well underway. We're just trying to finalise all of the data for the last financial year, but it should get to a stage where it's just almost automatically happening.
Thank you.
Councillor O'Brien.
I've got one through Madam Chair, thank you. Thanks, Marissa, for the report. So I'm also interested in point 3 there on the sustainable environment. I was actually at that meeting because I'm Vanessa's rep on that group. And I'm just wondering, also going back to the regional EV charging networks, I'm just wondering if Benalla is in that system, because I think the whole group is trying to form EV recharging stations. I'm just wondering if Benalla Rural City is also included in that group.
Yes, through you, Madam Chair. So there's been two projects through the Alliance, one looking at the suitability of EV for inclusion in council fleet, and the second one looking at a regional charging network, which has been completed, and out of that there was recommendations of the towns that are lacking EV charge stations. Benalla was identified as one of those towns. And the next step is we're going through the process of trying to identify potential sites and have all of the documents and data ready for any external funding opportunities that might come out. Hopefully will.
Councillor Davis.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Lisa, thanks for your report. It may only be 2.5 pages, but it packs a lot of punch. My question to you is, how can we get out to the community that we are doing something as far as the environment and sustainability goes? Because there's a lot of people out there don't think the council does anything. So how do we get your department on the front foot, getting out there saying what we're actually doing and moving forward?
Through you, Madam Chair, yes, probably something that we haven't done so well, and I guess it's just a matter of whether it's getting media releases out after we've completed projects or more information on our website, but I'll certainly take that.
Thank you.
Councillor Firth.
Marissa, with all the solar farms that are being built within our boundaries, when the calculations are taken with regards to carbon footprint and emissions, will they have an impact on our community's tally?
Through you, Madam Chair, my understanding is that it doesn't. It's where the use of energy is being reduced, or when people are actually using green energy, so or renewable energy. So it doesn't change how it's calculated for our municipality. It would only be if the community is using the renewable energy.
Thank you.
Are there any other questions?
Through Madam Chair, there is just one more about the EV charging stations. Do you think that having electric vehicle charging stations would attract people to a town now? I mean, I know that Euroa has 3 very big EV charging right behind their council building. Do you think that would be encouraging for people, especially young people that are concerned about the environment, or would it make much difference?
Through you, Madam Chair, it would probably encourage those with EVs to go off the freeway and visit the town. As far as the community purchasing, I guess it's purchasing their own EVs. I guess it's showing support or raising the awareness of EVs within the municipality, but most people who own an EV would probably be mostly charging.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Marissa, I just wondered, have you checked in with the Kabangi weed and how are we going? Is it Kabomba? That one, thank you.
So, yes, so a survey was done before we drew down the lake, and unfortunately it has expanded quite a bit in comparison to the same time last year, and obviously to a couple of years previous to that. So, especially upstream of the library, it's almost back to back up there. Below the islands at the lower end, there's quite a bit down there as well. So,
does the drawdown look like it's affected?
So at the minute, it's exposed all of the sites except an area up towards where the Hollands comes in, and we're looking at how we can work to maybe do some excavation work there to drain a bit more water out and potentially spray some of it.
Thank you. Can I have somebody move Bruce's report? Thank you, councillor O'Brien, seconded councillor Baranatni. All those in favour? That's passed. Thanks, Liz.
Chair, can I speak?
Yes.
I think it's a good report and good job. So we start. Wanted to comment on the report and the answers that you gave to the questions and the planning for the emission reductions and especially the EV plan for the council trade as well as for the town as a municipal area. Good. Okay.
Sorry about that.
Thank you. Yeah.
Thanks, Larissa.
Huh? Alright. So item 6 is the facility department activity report for the quarter ending the 31st of December 2020. In lieu of Greg's absence, Rebecca?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'll just take the report as read, just highlighting the fact that the facilities department is now in control of our information and communications technology. So Greg and his team have taken that responsibility on from now on. Apart from that, Madam Chair, to take any questions.
Are there any questions? Councillor Firth?
Yeah, Robert, the swimming pool retiling, that's been successful, both the retiling. I understand that the hydroponic pool was done as well.
You'll then tell Mr. CEO as one of your projects.
Thank you. Just through the chair, yes, the 25-metre indoor pool and the toddlers pool were stripped and retiled completely, and the progress pool, the grouting was removed and regrounded. And all reports are that all work has been successful, including the remedial work to the outdoor pool, where they stripped that and obviously repainted the surface as well. So we haven't finished with all of the work over there, so we're looking to finalise the two projects sometime in the next 2 months.
Thank you.
Are there any other questions? Otherwise, there's someone move that. Councillor King, seconded Councillor Firth. Would you like to speak?
No, thank you, Madam Chair. Good
Would you like
report.
to speak?
No, thank you, Madam Chair.
All those in favour? Thank you, that's passed. Item 7, Assets and Infrastructure Department Activity Report for the quarter ending 31st of December 2020.
Awesome, Madam Chair, if I can, thank you. The report presents activities of the Assets and Infrastructure Department for the quarter ended on the 31st of December 2020. Operations continue to provide maintenance throughout our municipality with an emphasis on the preparation for the Christmas period. There's also a continued focus on footpath maintenance and renewal and installation throughout the rural areas. If I can just point out some of the highlights, as I mentioned, installation of the Christmas decorations, flags and banners in the CBD, replacement of concrete footpaths in Shedford, Benalla and Cohen Streets, as well as other general maintenance like grading over 156 kilometres of unsealed roads within our operations area. Over to parks and gardens, continued contract management of our phase 2 of the tree audit and data collection, township roads and guttering spraying, as well as the elm leaf beetle management. The ongoing growing Victoria Botanical Gardens, installation of entrance and information signs to the gardens, as well as painting of all light poles and posts, as well as landscaping of the splash park precinct. Just on page 47, the asset management area, you might notice the variance in previous quarters with the table and the data, and it's mainly due to the implementation of the new asset edge reflect inspection program. So hopefully by next quarter we'll have more reliable figures there. Onto the financial implications on page 49. Some big ticket items there is an unfavorable variance due to salaries and on costs in the operations support area, as well as in the unsealed roads due to some of our roads not being finalised last financial year and attracting the extra depreciation. Recommendation that the report be noted.
Thank you, Adrian. Questions, councillor Bird?
Adrian, thanks for the report. Number 4 on the notes, unfavourable variance primarily due to internal plant hire expenses budgeted at a higher amount. Could you expand on that?
If I put through you, Madam Chair, ask for some assistance here because I wasn't here at the time, so I wasn't aware of.
Is that a handball?
Yeah.
Was that on notice? I'm sorry.
Yes, I got the handball and I'm passing it on.
Okay, so Madam Chair, there's actually a word missing there. After higher expenses should be higher than budget, higher expenses than budgeted at a higher amount. Due to that, internal plant hire was not to do with COVID, working one to the vehicle. So we did have a fairly big increase in the amount of costs associated with the vehicle hire. So when we have our plant available for use across operations, so where it is actually used, it does get charged to that particular.
So it really is
So
internal.
it's internal, yes, that's not external. We budget for a certain amount of internal plant hire. In this case, because of our use of one person to a vehicle, it was higher than it is.
Thank you.
There's also someone out there, thank you.
I can't get, yeah, right. So, councillor Claridge?
Yes, on page 48, Adrian, it states that all the capital construction has now been all footpath construction is now complete. Does that mean we won't be doing any footpaths for the rest of the financial year?
That's from a capital perspective. We'll still be undertaking maintenance on footpaths. All our permanent footpath works have since been finalised.
Thank you.
Councillor Gallagher.
Thank you, Chair. The question is about footpaths again. Looking at page number 45, 3 bullet points about concrete footpath, sealed footpath, and gravel footpath. So what is the mechanism of choosing which sort of footpath you're going to put on the certain area? Is it concrete, gravel, or sealed? Is that any mechanism to go on that?
Generally, depending on the use and the area, so it tends to be prioritised. And again, not being here previously, I can't answer why some footpaths are concrete versus gravel versus a normal tuner seal. So it usually goes on the use. You'll tend to find that within the CBD area and high use residential area, we tend to go concrete because they tend to wear better. Whereas we expand out of the CBD or the township areas, we then go to either a tuner seal or an unsealed path.
Thank you.
Councillor Davis.
Thank you. Adrian, not putting you on the spot, but how's the jet catcher going? We haven't sort of heard about this machine. It costs us a lot of money. Can you comment on it?
Look, I'm really keen to get some figures up to you, and we'll try and do that very, very soon. It's doing really well, and I'm getting some comments back from our operations team how much more work we're getting and how successful the machine is working. So I haven't got any data for you here, but it's coming. But there's some really positive signs.
Are there any other questions? I just have one. Hay production? On page 46, contract meetings with advisors, administration following contracts, hay production.
And then the airport, we do use out the airport
Okay, thank you.
grounds.
Thank you. Can I someone move the report? Thank you, councillor Davis, seconded councillor Gunnar-Rutney. Would you like to speak?
Certainly would. Thank you, Madam Chair. Adrian, I know you've only been here a short period of time, but you're starting to put your mark on the situation here. I just want, if you pass the thanks on to your staff. I've never seen Benalla look so good. You know, it's a credit when you drive down Bridge Street, you see the parks and gardens, you see the showgrounds, how well they've been mowed and looked after. And even in the back streets, things just seem to be, things are just looking so great. I mean, you just pass on your stuff. Also, I work next door on the weekends, and I'm amazed how many times you see a staff car there, car there on the weekend, when they're coming and grab a truck or something, obviously gone out to do an emergency job. So I mean, where's councils? We don't see a lot of that, but I certainly see it and appreciate what their staff do. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you. I'll certainly pass that on, so thank you very much.
Thank you.
Would you like to speak, Councillor Gunnar?
Yes, thank you, Chair. It's a good report and thank you. Good to see a lot of work happening and good to see about 847 square meters of footpaths done. And I would personally like to see more happening in the next 4 months if we can find some budget or money somewhere else, and that would be great because this community is really urging for more footpaths. Good report, thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else like to speak? All those in favour? Thank you, that's passed. Item 8, capital projects, so it was for the quarter ending 30th of December 2020. Adrian.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So the purpose of the report is to provide a status update for the capital program activity for the quarter ending the 31st of December 2020. Capital projects are funded from general revenue and grant funding. The following detail provides an update on the status of key capital projects. We're just going through shoulder resheets, works were completed in November. All crack sealing works were completed prior to the Christmas break. All reseals have now been completed, including 22 kilometres on Devonish and Dobson Road, Warrenbane, reseals in Urban Benalla, Evans, James Drive, Bray Street, Racecourse Road, it goes on. Regulation, stabilisation and edging, all works completed. More footpath work, Thomas Street footpath and drainage upgrade, 90 metres of footpath and drainage works through to Amber Avenue were completed. Seeing that we're keen on the footpaths, I'll continue with the 2 sections of Clark Street, Benalla, D Street to Kent Street, and from Cohen Street through to 127 Clark Street. As you may know, the Shawbrook Avenue through to Rivergum Avenue, and the replacement of the footpath in Nash Street, Benalla. A little bit of an update on the buildings, Visitor Information Centre, site survey, access plans and preliminary geotechnical investigations have now been completed. Arundel Street Ovals facility upgrade, the works were completed during the quarter. The basketball half courts, the majority of the works associated with the new basketball half courts completed, or were completed at the time. Moving on to the car park, number 2 Mayor Street, works associated with the car park are due to commence in April 2021, although some demolition work has already started. Plant equipment, as highlighted earlier, the jet catcher road maintenance unit was delivered in October during the quarter and is certainly now operational, as well as procurement for the loader at the landfill has now been finalised, and we'll be expecting delivery of that machine hopefully sometime in April. The landfill cell 3 construction design work has gone into the design of the next landfill cell. One of the main aims is to address the legacy issues and utilise existing airspace within the void area. Transfer station, building works, shed are complete, the civil works to be completed in coming months. And in the recreation area, the splash park, water features associated with the splash park are now installed and, as we know, are operating. And the works related to the playground have also commenced. Onto the finances, you would have seen that for the quarter, the actual expenditure was around the $1.4 million, with the year-to-date budget being around the 1.56 million. Just some important notes there, the footpath works are ongoing at the December period. However, all footpath works, as identified for the full-year budget, have now been complete. Plant equipment variable variance was due to the delay in the purchase of our new loader, so that will turn around in the next quarter, and waste projects are continuing to progress with the self-construction to be completed. by the end of the calendar year. Recommendation that the report be noted.
Are there any questions? Councillor Firth?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Adrian, thanks for the report. Transfer station, can you just expand a little bit on that? We understand that the building's actually completed and the civil works. Civil works consist of fire and Baker Street. The civil works is the road. Is that going to be a sealed road? Could you just expand on exactly where we are and when we hope to actually get out there and start using the transfer station?
Yeah, through you, Madam Chair. So yes, that's correct. So the shed is now complete. The civil works relating to the sawtooth, that is also complete, but we still need to complete the sealing of the internal roadways and the installation of some curb and channel. Curb and channel works programmed to start within the next 2 to 3 weeks. Following that being complete, we'll be able to seal the internal roadways.
Okay, so just a follow up with regards to that, we'll have that weatherproof by winter, we're hoping, and
Well before winter, certainly the internal roads I want to have sealed within the next 5 to 6 weeks.
okay, great, thank you.
Councillor Claridge?
Councillor Firth has stolen my thunder. That's exactly what I was going to ask, and when we hope to see a commission.
Councillor Davis?
You might have taken some notice, Adrian, but talking about the loader, were we successful in organising a quick hitch for the front of it or not? Was that made available or not?
If I can, through you, Madam Chair, I might try another big handball, seeing that CEO might be a little bit more familiar about this discussion topic.
I actually, you could take it on notice.
I might have to take it on notice, but I'm not
I'd
too
like
sure
to
whether
take
it's-
that handball and get the CEO to answer that question, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
No.
No, I take it on notice. As I think I discussed this a couple of meetings ago, we're looking to bring an additional recommendation back to the council with the possibility of swapping out what was presented to the council with a larger machine due to some issues with the supply of that particular machine. The specification of that machine is still being decided. It may actually include a quick hitch, but we're just confirming that at the moment. We've been jokingly saying that we're pleased to have a quick hitch. But, that report should be coming back before the council within the next 4 to 5 minutes.
Thank you, Adrian.
Thank you, Councillor Davis. Any other questions? Okay. Can I pass on that, please? Councillor Dunlap and seconded by Councillor Davis. Would you like to speak, Councillor?
No, thank you, Chair.
Would you like to speak? All those in favour? Thank you. And move on, close the meeting at 7:24. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Have a please.
Good meeting.
Yeah.